my main focus today is kind of give a state of the state, but also to kind of look at some of the key trends that we're seeing here at Aberdeen in application development, in testing, in new technologies, and in really the ways that all of these things are transforming application development and testing today. I'm Jim Raposa. I'm the research director at Aberdeen. And just kind of give a quick agenda for some of the things I'll be talking about today. So as I said, we're going to look at, from our research, what we're seeing as some of the top trends, in DevOps, in CI/CD, in testing, and really, in new technologies and practices and strategies that businesses are following today, and especially that businesses in media and telecom are seeing it across the board. We're going to look at some of the top challenges that we've identified, the hurdles, the pain points that media and telecom organizations are encountering, in application development and testing. We're going to look at some of the ways that leaders, and we'll talk a bit about how we identify leaders, but leading media and telecom organizations are working to improve and boost their agility, to increase collaboration, to get better insight, intelligence, increased automation, in their applications, in their development practices, and in their testing. And we're going to look at some of the key capabilities that we've identified that media and telecom businesses are looking for when they evaluate, when they deploy testing solutions. We're going to look at some of the benefits that they're gaining by adopting really strong, mobile-ready, automated testing solutions. For those of you, if you're not familiar with the Aberdeen Group, or if this is your first Aberdeen presentation, we are a research firm. We're an analyst firm. We're a little different than maybe some others that you've run into. We don't rank products. We don't rank vendors. We're not about, graphing who's best at certain things. What we are doing is we're talking to the community. We're surveying organizations like your own about how they're using technology. What are the drivers that are pushing them to deploy new capabilities, to deploy new technologies? What are the pain points that they're looking to address? What strategies are they following? What technologies are they deploying? All of these things. And what we also do is we do metrics. We see who's good at it, who has the most uptime, who has the best quality, who has best user satisfaction, all these other key metrics in success. And by tracking that data, we can identify who the leaders, who the best in class are. And once we've identified those leaders, we can kind of figure out what are their characteristics, what are the capabilities they're deploying, what are the strategies they're following, the business practices that they adopt to gain a lot of these key benefits that they're seeing. And once we've identified that, we can use that data to make recommendations that other businesses, other media telecom organizations can follow to become like these leaders. So the kind of housekeeping elements out of the way, I'll jump right into the meat of today's presentation. And as I said, a lot of the focus here is the way that application development, that testing, that deploying applications and DevOps are really transforming today. If you look at how organizations, they design, how they develop, how they deploy, manage, test applications, it's really changed radically in recent years. But one of the biggest transformations, I've been covering these technologies for a really long time, and it's one of the most rapid and significant transformations I've seen in over 30 years when it comes to developing applications. We're seeing this move from huge monolithic traditional applications, and really, businesses are developing and building applications that are more agile, that are distributed. They're building dynamic microservices, utilizing containers and Kubernetes and hybrid cloud environments. And before I go on, I'm going to be talking a lot about Kubernetes today. It is the biggest transformation in application development today. And before I move on, I do want to recognize that we did lose a key member of the technology community this week. Anyone who knew Dan Cohn, he was a leader at the Linux Foundation. He was recently running their project to help develop cures and treatments for COVID-19. Before that, for a long time, he was a leader at CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And he was really one of the main forces behind the push and the growth of Kubernetes. I had the opportunity to meet and talk with Dan many times at KubeCons and other events. And he really, if you look at KubeCon, that went from this tiny little niche conference to really, in the last couple of years, a must-attend conference for anyone who's developing applications, who's trying to figure out how to manage and deploy and build modern applications. Because when you talk about modern applications, you can't really do so without talking about Kubernetes. So, this is just, Dan's going to be greatly missed, but his force behind Kubernetes will be felt for many, many years, as this is, we do see this as one of the main ways that businesses are building applications today. So as I said, at Aberdeen, we do a lot of research into, what are the challenges, what are the pain points. So we recently ran a huge survey on DevOps, on testing, on Kubernetes, it was across the board, but we had a large number of respondents in the media and telecom sector. So we were able to, filter and analyze that data specifically for these businesses. And so this was the top out of a list of, I think there were around 20 choices. The respondents could select more than one, but these were the top challenges that media and telecom organizations were seeing when it came to application development. Missed project milestones, obviously that's a huge challenge for anybody. But tying that for number one is that applications today are very complex. And that does tie to these transformations, to these changes that we are seeing. When you look at the way that containers and Kubernetes and orchestrated applications, how different they are from the way you would develop applications years ago. I mentioned KubeCon. I did get a chance to speak with a lot of the original Google people who were behind the open source release of Kubernetes. It came from a Google project called Borg. And part of the reason they ended up open sourcing and releasing Kubernetes is that the way they were doing everything was so complex that when Google would bring on new developers, it would take them months and months to get them up to speed. So part of their, it was partially obviously they released it open source, but it was partially self-serving because they wanted there to be developers out there that knew what they were doing and knew how to build orchestrated applications. So that was part of the idea of releasing Kubernetes to as open source. And part of that, so that's what we're seeing today, the complexity of these modern applications, especially when it comes to dealing, trying to manage, trying to test, trying to deploy these applications using tools and solutions that were built for more legacy monolithic systems. Again, tying to this move to containers and microservices, we see the challenge of a lack of portability. Again, when you look at sort of classic applications, a lot of times they weren't terribly portable. Obviously, when you're building orchestrated containerized microservices, portability is one of the main benefits that you gain. Tying directly into what we're talking about a lot today for media and telecom businesses, the fourth top challenge is that they're finding that testing and QA is taking more effort than they expected. We talk a lot about, shifting left, shifting right, continuous, and a lot of these businesses are challenged to do testing in that way and to do it the right way in these additionally complex application environments. And they lack the ability to scale. Again, I keep coming back to this. That does tie to sort of traditional, scaling traditional applications is a different thing than scaling Kubernetes-based, containerized microservices. Ruchi talked about the Selenium scaler, and a lot of that is based on that kind of ability to scale. We see it not just in applications, but in the tools that businesses are using to do these, to do testing, to do management, to do analysis, and all the other things you need to do to deploy an effective application. So, when we analyzed again, looking specifically at media and telecom businesses, looking at what I see as the leading transformation in these new technologies, we found that 43% of media and telecom businesses are working to convert their existing monolithic applications to Kubernetes, which is interesting there. I've been analyzing Kubernetes and containers for a few years now, and most businesses that are deploying containerized and microservices, it's almost always a greenfield. You're not taking your old applications and converting them to Kubernetes. You're just doing your new apps. So this is kind of a big sea change that we're seeing in our research, that finally we're in sort of phase 2 of Kubernetes, where many businesses are looking to convert their existing applications to Kubernetes. And to looking at sort of the ubiquity of this, 30% of the media and telecom businesses in our survey have 250 or more container-based applications, and a subset of that have over 1,000. So again, the growth in this it's still small. I'll show you some of our data. The amount of actual applications that are out there being developed using Kubernetes and microservices is still relatively small compared to everything, but the growth has been fairly aggressive over the last few years, basically more than doubling every year in our research. And interestingly, 25% of these businesses are using containers as part of their testing infrastructure. I've had many conversations with SaaS over the years that it is sort of the natural next step. I know SaaS uses containers and Kubernetes as part of their own infrastructure, and many businesses now are using it as part of testing. There's a lot of advantages that come from that, both from scale, from flexibility, from agility, and just new capabilities that you couldn't do before containers and before Kubernetes. So, in our research, we looked at how are media and telecom businesses using Kubernetes today. Not surprisingly, not a lot of it still, even out of all these businesses that are, in the process of converting their existing applications or in process of moving towards Kubernetes, most of this is still an in development, a proof of concept type of deployments. 51% of those that are using Kubernetes are still mainly just in that phase. Out of that, then you have 25% that are actually, they're testing, they're getting close, they're piloting their use of Kubernetes, and out of our research, only 14% are using it in production. So again, this has been growth we've seen over years. The numbers are still relatively small, but Kubernetes has become the new way to develop applications. And as we talked about before, complexity is one of the main challenges that these businesses are seeing, that these organizations are seeing, but they're still struggling to adapt everything else to this. And we're going to talk a bit about that, because as you're transforming your application infrastructure, as you're moving to new ways of doing things, as you're adopting these sort of scalable, stateless, serverless, and we're not really getting into many of the other cutting edge technologies that are part of CNCF and that are tied to the use of Kubernetes and containers, whether that's things like Prometheus for monitoring applications, or Helm for deploying applications. I mean, there's a whole set of other projects and technologies that are part of this ecosystem that are in different stages of maturity. Some are just as mature as Kubernetes, some are relatively new, but many businesses are aggressively trying to adopt these things. And really, not only does it add complexity, it brings new challenges to how you test, to how you ensure quality in these types of applications. So what's the result here? So we're, in our research across the board, not just for media and telecom, but for definitely as we filtered down for media and telecom providers, they are adopting these technologies. They are adopting Kubernetes. They're adopting not just that, they're across the board, whether it's CI/CD, DevOps, different technologies to improve their development practices, to be more agile, to be more flexible. They're deploying these new cutting edge development technologies. They're adapting new strategies and processes. And one of the main reasons they're doing that is to meet the demands of today's users. Again, Ruchi was showing some of the things you don't ever want to see when you're launching, when you're trying to watch a Netflix show. And I appreciated many of the examples she provided. It was all shows that I watched, like Ozark and Stranger Things. But today's users expect really, everybody, who, no matter what your business is, your end users think of you in the same way they think of Netflix, they think of Amazon, they think of Apple. They expect the highest quality applications. They expect the best functionality. They expect high levels of uptime. They expect just, what they don't expect is, good enough or any kind of lag or problems or poor functionality. These users today, they've become used to the highest levels of great experience. They want the best capabilities, they want the best performance, and they really want really high reliability. In our research, we found over the years, any kind of problem in an app, any kind of lag, if it takes, few seconds for it to load or anything, they just leave. Seconds of any problem or any lag or delay, you lose a really high percentage of users. And Netflix can probably survive that, but a lot of other businesses can't. You have competitors, there are other options out there. So businesses really need to turn to these really high quality, really high capability solutions. But as they are, adopting these new technologies, as they are leveraging Kubernetes to build applications, they're leveraging containers to deploy applications. They are taking advantage of things like serverless, to provide this kind of unlimited scalability and portability to, that you didn't exist in applications before. It's really creating a new paradigm, but these businesses are finding they need a new paradigm when it comes to testing, when it comes to quality in these applications. And what we're finding is that leading organizations and that leading media and telecom organizations especially are looking for similar innovations, looking for similar cutting edge capabilities, and looking for new ways of doing things when it comes to their testing solutions and how they're ensuring quality in their applications. Now, this is kind of interesting. Again, this was our cuts in our research on how telecom and media are doing things. And here we asked what were their top performance indicators when it came to application quality. So, again, this was out of a long list. And what we're doing here is we're comparing them to other businesses. So, and we can see there are some differences between what telecom and media organizations value and focus on when it comes to performance, and then what other organizations do. So, by a large number, they're very focused on the percentage of IT budget used to develop and maintain applications. That's a fairly high delta, probably around 30–40% there. They are actually less focused on cost savings, which is kind of interesting than their peers in other sectors, in other verticals. But they are, they're, also a little less focused, but pretty similar on capturing the right user requirements, and on, they're very focused on what the failure rate during application testing is. So, there's nothing really unusual here, but, it's interesting in that a lot of it comes down to not just cost, but to understanding what your users need and to really having the highest quality and user experience in these applications. And I found this kind of interesting. We also asked, who are the, what roles in these organizations, media and telecom organizations, who are the champions of testing? Who are the people pushing for testing? Who are the ones pushing that, we need to be shifting left, we need to be leveraging testing in all areas of our development process. Like from the very beginning, we need to be focused on testing and quality. And we, and obviously in that, I know Sauce has had these great little charts where you see where, you have the chart here, and somewhere in the middle is testing, and then it's kind of ignored at the beginning and kind of ignored at the end. And when you talk about effective continuous testing, what we really are focused on is not just shifting left, but shifting right. And the interesting thing here is that, and I've had these conversations before, there's this, when you shift left, there's this desire that developers become more concerned about testing, and that the DevOps teams become more concerned about testing. But what we're seeing here is it's still where, at least in this recent survey, which was just about a month ago, testing is still being driven by other areas of the organization. So by far, the majority, 57%, say that the champions of testing are IT staff, IT and managers, IT directors, people like that. They are the main ones saying we need to be doing more testing. We need to be ensuring application quality. This is followed by IT ops. Again, they're the people who usually, when there is problems, they get the calls. Then you see, executives, CIOs, heads of IT, CEOs even are the champions. And really at the bottom, DevOps leads 11%, developers 2%. Those are the people who are should be driving testing. When we talk about shift left, when we talk about continuous testing, we really want that to be something that developers are really keyed in on. So the reason I found this data interesting in that this is an area where a lot of media and telecom organizations have an opportunity to grow, to really inculcate in your DevOps leads and in your developers the importance of testing. When you're moving towards continuous testing, shifting left, shifting right, shifting everywhere, you don't want to be, it shouldn't be a thing where you're kind of forcing this on those organizations. They should be welcoming it. It should be a key part of their development processes, of their strategies, of their daily, everyday part of developing. We often find that, when testing is driven by developers, is driven by DevOps, is welcomed by them, then it is used. They stick to it, they embrace it, they see the benefits of it. And we're going to get to a little bit more to what some of those benefits are in a little bit. Now, again, I found this somewhat interesting. We, again, comparing media and telecom organizations to their peers in other industries. Again, this was out of a long list. We asked them what some of the areas, the DevOps practices and development practices they were deploying. Some deltas here. I don't think anything too surprising. We see they outpace their peers in areas like software change and configuration management. And importantly, in continuous functional testing, which obviously is a huge area here. So we see that 43% of media and telecom are practicing continuous testing. And as we're going to see, they're gaining some pretty significant benefits from that embrace of testing, from that embrace of shifting left, shifting right, shifting everywhere. So it's not a huge delta, but they are adopting this from a fairly large standpoint. Continuous integration, 35% of media and telecom are deploying that and agile teams. I'm kind of surprised, I think, to see a little bit more of that, but higher levels, but that's what they're reporting. Continuous performance testing, they're a little bit behind other areas there, and continuous security testing, still relatively low. There's the whole growth of DevSecOps, and we do expect to see more embrace of those areas, but it's still, still below some of these other DevOps and application practices, that we're seeing in this survey. So one of the main focuses here, we just saw, that the number 43% of media and telecom organizations that are embracing continuous testing. And we've really found in our research, not just in this most recent survey, but in all of our surveys on quality, on testing over the last few years, the importance of this full life cycle, continuous testing, of not just shifting left, but shifting right, of having testing be part of all aspects of development. So the initial phases of prototyping and coding, that you're doing testing, that in the traditional areas of quality and QA, that you're doing testing. In production, you're doing testing to ensure that the application is still performing and working the way it should, and that you're taking that information and bringing it all the way back to the beginning as you're doing new revs or new cycles or even new but similar applications. We've really seen that businesses that are leaders in application development, in application performance, and in application quality are leveraging continuous testing, and not just continuous, that they're taking advantage of automated testing. We saw in Ruchi's presentation Netflix is heavily leveraging automated capabilities to get the most out of their testing, to get the best results. And we see this across the board in leaders like them, that they are adopting this kind of technology, that it's continuous automated testing, again, from the very beginning phases of coding and development in production, and bringing it all the way back full circle. These leaders are leveraging continuous, and not just that, but they're looking for advanced capabilities. So they want artificial intelligence driving that automated testing, whether it's machine learning or just kind of understanding ways things have been done to better inform that automation. You can really save time, increase quality, reduce downtime. Again, we see all of these technologies. They've all been cloud-based, but we're seeing an increased use of hybrid nowadays too. More applications are being developed from hybrid. In our research, most organizations have embraced a hybrid infrastructure, so their entire infrastructure works seamlessly from public cloud to private cloud, on-premise, and back and forth. They don't treat them as two separate things. It's just sort of a holistic whole, for lack of a better term, for their infrastructure. And as we've talked about, a lot of it is about the move towards microservices, to Kubernetes, to new ways of developing applications. These leading businesses, they know that they need testing developed and built from the ground up for these cutting edge, complex, orchestrated, agile, portable, stateless, serverless applications. And they know they can't do testing using older tools that don't understand that were built for a monolithic world. These businesses are turning towards modern, advanced testing tools that understand these kind of applications. And what are they getting from that? So, this next couple of slides here are about some of the benefits we've seen. Again, we cut this data on Media Telecom that were doing continuous testing. And we saw that these were the top 4 benefits out of a long list. I think there were about 30 potential benefits that they reported. So overall, within their application development testing, they saw improvement in all of their processes and operations. Just below that, better development quality. And this can't be, this is why we do testing. It's when things move towards agile. I remember there was some ideas years ago that you don't really need to do testing because any problems will get washed out in the next rev. And instead, the exact opposite happened. Problems propagated through multiple revs and never got fixed, and became so hairy and complex that it was almost impossible to fix them. So when businesses adopt continuous testing, when they shift left, shift right, they see better development quality, better quality across the board through their entire application lifecycle. And we see that there. They've improvements in their entire application lifecycle management. That's one of the top benefits that media and telecom organizations are reporting when they adopt continuous application testing. And most importantly, we saw that costs were one of the performance criteria. So these businesses, these media and telecom organizations that adopt continuous testing, one of the top benefits they're reporting are lower costs. So those were the top reported benefits that these organizations are seeing. Now, here we compared their the media and telecom organizations that are doing continuous testing, the benefits they saw over what their peers were, their peers who weren't doing continuous testing. So we see that these media and telecom businesses that are leveraging continuous testing are more than 2.5 times more likely than their competitors to see a reduction in application development costs. Again, that was one of their top performance criteria. They're getting that benefit. They are reducing costs. Every time there's a problem in an app, we've seen that there's huge costs associated with fixing those issues, with identifying those issues. And if they're found at the wrong time or too late, you basically often have to start from scratch. But when businesses are using continuous testing, they're really reducing development costs by reducing these quality issues, failed quality issues. Importantly, when media and telecom organizations adopt continuous testing, they're 90% more likely than their competitors to deliver projects on or below budget. So they're meeting their goals. I mean, that's one of the key goals. They are delivering their app probably often on time or ahead of time, at or below budget. I mean, that's key. Every time projects go above budget, that's not just a problem for that project. It's a problem for future projects. We often find it in our surveys that the people who hold the purse strings have long memories, and they remember those projects that go over budget, and that can become a problem with new projects. So by using continuous testing, these leading organizations, leading media and telecom businesses are really meeting those budget demands. Importantly, they're 40% more likely than their competitors to have improvements in user satisfaction. We talked about the importance of meeting the high demands, the high expectations of modern users by doing great testing, by continuously doing it, by doing it not just during the QA segment, but in earliest phases and in the shift right during production and run times. They're really making sure that these applications meet their users' needs and give them the experience that they're looking for. And testing often comes down to performance. These businesses that are doing continuous testing are 90% more likely than their peers and their competitors to see increased application performance, to really meet their needs, meet their goals when it comes to having high performing, highly reliable applications that don't have downtime. So really, continuous testing, it's not just an adoption. You're not just adopting this because it's a cool new technology. We found that media and telecom businesses that adopt continuous testing, they're getting hard benefits from it. And most importantly, we talked about these new trends, these transformations. Continuous testing is designed to work with this world, to work with Kubernetes, to work with containers, to work with these agile, stateless, serverless, orchestrated applications. This type of testing has moved beyond monolithic and is specifically designed to work with these kind of applications, to work with CI/CD practices, to work with the way that leading media and telecom businesses are building applications today. So what can other organizations do to kind of join these leaders to effectively deploy continuous testing? We kind of look at it in a sort of a 3-step or 3-phase process. So which kind of, if you think of it, that continuous full life cycle standpoint kind of works that way. So, when you're effectively testing applications at the development stage, right at the beginning phases of coding, you can find those problems, those functionality issues, those performance problems with plenty of time to make, design changes, to make feature changes, to change course when it's easier as opposed to later on when it becomes much harder. We found that, when testing in the earliest stages can show, when certain actions or certain types of loads break an application, when specific buttons or other design features don't work the right way. Again, Ruchi showed all the testing they do on multiple browsers and different languages. When you do that kind of testing early on, that's when you find those kind of issues that you might hang around till later if you weren't doing it at the right time. So, first, work in development stage. Second, during deployment, a lot of times, developers finish coding the application, they throw it out the window and don't worry about it anymore. But you really need to be focused in on that operations standpoint, figuring out how to effectively deploy the application, especially when we're looking at this sort of containerized Kubernetes world. You need to understand what the server loads are, what the cloud requirements are, what kind of clusters and pods you're building out of containers, what the necessary infrastructure is to meet this application requirements. We found that leading businesses and leading media telecom businesses, they don't just adjust their infrastructure as demand increases, and especially this is one of the main benefits of Kubernetes, that that dynamically scales as demand increases. So you need to have testing in the deployment phase to really understand what resources are required in order to effectively run the application, even when highest peaks or unexpected peaks happen. And really the last stage is, to keep it going, to future-proof, to as I said, bring it all the way back to the beginning. Testing isn't just a one and done proposition. Today's environments, these complex Kubernetes, serverless environments, hybrid cloud environments are very dynamic. They're constantly changing. They're very portable, and really companies need to have put in place testing and new capabilities that have this continuous end-to-end perspective that are built for these kind of applications, that really inform their capabilities and decisions to do ongoing testing and ensure the best application quality and performance that meets modern user expectations and allows you to continue to grow and innovate with new technologies as you're building your application infrastructure. And with that, that's the main part of my presentation. It looks like we have a few minutes left. Alyssa, I know there might be some questions or Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. Lots of really great insights in here around the shifting landscape and how things are changing. You talked, we do have a couple of questions to answer your question. But I think just to start off, I think it was pretty obvious to me, the mention of Kubernetes and containers is just throughout your presentation. And we have a question around that as well. But first, I just want to hear generally, I mean, how do you see some of the ways that Kubernetes in general is changing testing, like as a whole? Can you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, when you look at these kind of applications, it's really, the capabilities from Kubernetes are like nothing we've had before. I mean, if you've ever seen a serverless deployment, for example, I at a KubeCon, I saw a vendor a developer show an application they had built where there was basically just a little tiny line of function code that they put out in like a APAC server cloud. And that was all that existed on the cloud up until the moment that somebody tried to use the application, and then it spanned into this massive cluster. So basically you had an application that went from nothing to a full-fledged, highly scalable application. And that's a really new way of looking at how applications are built. We're kind of used to this, here's the application, it's always going to be this way kind of, and just test it. So when you're looking at orchestrated applications, and also when you're looking at a lot of the other things that go into a Kubernetes, service meshes and different deployment vectors and some of these other CNCF projects, it's constantly evolving, and you really need testing that is also constantly evolving. So the way we see it is, if you're using testing that just kind of looks at something as an application, it's often going to fail. It's not going to understand. It'll see things that Kubernetes is doing as a problem, because it just wasn't built for that kind of world. So really, what we're seeing is adoption of tools that are built from this sort of cloud native perspective. And like I said, most of the great testing tools nowadays, and I know this is true of you guys, is that you're basically drinking the champagne as well. And a lot of your infrastructure is Kubernetes based as well. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. The biggest one being our headless instances that we now host in the cloud. But yeah, we're like you said, we're drinking our own champagne. And we're seeing a lot of that same shift in terms of even just the tooling that testers use is changing to adapt to some of this, right? We used to just talk about Selenium and Appium were kind of the only players in the space. And now there's just been this huge proliferation of even just test frameworks. So it's crazy to see the ecosystem just get so massive. So to that, you mentioned there are a lot of elements to maintaining a Kubernetes environment. And so we had a question from one of our attendees around, in your research, have you seen any trends around what users are doing to have any kind of package management to help package, configure, deploy applications on Kubernetes clusters? Any sort of trend you're seeing there, or any tools that speak to you?
Yeah, like I said, I don't tend to get into who's the vendor to use that type of question.
Fair enough.
But that is one of the most mature areas of Kubernetes. When you look at, because most of that comes from the container world. So, the way Docker split into, with other businesses, there's a lot of great solutions out there in the package management world when it comes to Kubernetes, when it comes to containers and microservices. I would recommend, if you have never attended a KubeCon or never gone to the CNCF websites, there's a lot of really, really great information there on cloud native applications, on Kubernetes, on a lot of these different projects. People are doing really interesting things. You talk about frameworks. I've seen Kubernetes, orchestrated apps that are built to use, to figure out frameworks dynamically, for testing and things like that. So there's a lot of great information there. I believe a KubeCon is coming up, but it's a virtual KubeCon. So if you're trying to learn more about Kubernetes, about how to build these modern applications, there's definitely some opportunities. I talked about going to these events, and when you could physically go to them, every one I went to grew by over 50% each event. So if you're a developer, you really need to be understanding, and if you're a test engineer as well, you need to be understanding these technologies.
Yeah, I went to my first KubeCon last year and down in San Diego, and it was, I mean, they took up pretty much the entire San Diego Convention Center. It felt like it was massive. Yeah.
And it rained the whole time. San Diego, what
yeah, it did. I was so bummed about that. Coming from Northern California, you're used to like going to San Diego, getting all the sunshine. But yeah, great event. And yeah, that's actually in a couple of weeks, KubeCon. So
yeah, it would have been in Boston this year.
Oh man, I'm missing out. I'm missing these conferences. There's a lot of surprise I've noticed coming in around your slide around who's championing testing within organizations. Yeah. I know you expressed the same shock, but I mean, I think there are a few people on the line who are just equally surprised that developers were just so low on that list, right, and we're in such a small number. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but really, I mean, there's this belief. I mean, it's sauce too. We believe that development, a good testing culture starts at development.
Yeah.
What can teams do to bring that number, to the right more? I mean, how can we get developers invested in testing?
Yeah, I think that it's one of these areas where, the more they do it, the more it leads to it. And it has to be kind of inculcated from a developer standpoint. I remember actually at the SauceCon I went to in Austin, there was a great presentation. I believe it was a gentleman from Walmart, I think I'm going to say. But he talked about how the first time they shifted left, they kind of, decreed it to developers, and they did it for a while, and then it kind of stopped. And then the second time, they basically made it part of the culture. And, then it started to be adopted more by developers. It became something they started to do themselves. I think that is kind of a key way to do it. It's like, you don't want a testing decree and say, a developer, thou shalt test early in development. But part of that is just education. And I think there are still developers who don't understand modern testing tools, and they have an opinion of testing that maybe came from other areas. And I think as they start to use these automated continuous testing tools, they realize that they actually do help them and aren't just a barrier to getting things done.
Yeah, absolutely. And luckily, like I mentioned before, there's just been a proliferation of tools to try and make them developer friendly and give them access to the tools that they need, the resources they need to help them lean into this. So lots of opportunity for that to grow. So hopefully next time you present research like this, we'll be able to see that number starting to increase.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we're at time, Jim. Again, this insight was really great. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's always great to catch up with you.
Yeah, it was great to talk to everybody, and I hope everyone got something useful out of the presentation.